Good morning. It is May 3rd, and this is my first voice recording for the Process Journal about the final assessment project, the topic of which for me is PBLA, or Portfolio-Based Language Assessment. And Portfolio-Based Language Assessment is something that all teachers who teach in LINK programs, or Language Instruction for Newcomers to Canada, all of these teachers are required by the federal government to participate in PBLA and have PBLA binders for their students. When you first become a LINK teacher in Canada, I'm going to speak about my experience in Ontario specifically, though I imagine it transfers to the rest of the country. When you first become a LINK teacher, you are required to take CLB, or Canadian Language Benchmark training, to make sure that you relatively fully understand the Canadian language benchmarks. When you finish that, you are then put into portfolio-based language assessment training. And as you complete that, when you complete that, you are basically then able and expected to understand and know how to create the assessments properly. When a course starts, you need to do a needs assessment and goal setting with your students. Oftentimes, what teachers do, at least from my experience, is they get a list of can-do statements or things from the CLBs that students are expected to be able to do at that level, and they have the students self-assess whether or not they can do these things. They also have the students write statements about what they would like to be able to do when they finish the course and why they're in the course. The needs assessment is not generally very formal. It is the students self-assessing and identifying what they want to learn. And oftentimes, at least in my experience from working at Algonquin College, the teachers are expected to do intake interviews where we give each student 10 to 15 minutes of one-on-one time where we sit down and literally get to know them. So PBLA really forces the teacher to change their style into that which should fit the style, the needs, or the topics of the learners. Now, when teaching LINK in Ontario anyway, from LINK 1 to LINK 5, the curriculum is already set for you by the government. After LINK 5, there really are no set objectives or set themes, so the teachers have a lot more freedom at those levels to choose what they want to teach. At the levels previous to that, links 1 to 5, the government has spent a lot of time and money developing resources for the teachers to use. So you would see a website, which I will show you later in a video. You get your themes, and generally they will provide you with a bunch of resources. So reading, writing, speaking, and listening materials, and sometimes you're even lucky enough to get some PBLA assessments in there. Now you'll see on my Tumblr page that there are lots of other resources as well. If you are a TESOL Ontario member or TESOL Canada, then you have access to a site that's called Tutela, and Tutela has lots of paper resources, and it's really this huge webinar base for all of Canada, and there are lots of webinars and instructional videos and workshops on how to create PBLA assessments and what PBLA really is. You'll also see on the Tumblr page that I've added some videos of one about a website called ESL Library, which is extremely popular, and they are now getting a higher demand for their resources to include some kind of PBLA aspect. So they are doing that now as well, which you can see in the video. And I've included a training session or an introduction to training of PBLA for some teachers. In my opinion, PBLA is a great thing. It is a lot of work for the teacher, but it is a great thing for the students. It's also a great thing for the teacher at the end of the program, because that way they are able to justify whether or not a student's benchmarks should or should not change. I've heard from many teachers that if a student challenges their final benchmarks, the teachers are much more confident to pull out the binder and say, well, look, this is where you were at the beginning and this is where you are now, and I don't see enough progression in order to change your benchmark. And in general, students can't fight that because there's hardcore proof. As I said, PBLA is a lot of extra work for the teachers. We have to go through a lot of training to do this, and even still, people generally have a lot of questions. It's a very challenging concept and program, but it is beneficial for the students in the long run, and it is a way to specialize your teaching. So one of my main questions in this project, or in this proposal, is I would like to find out, or somewhat answer, whether or not PBLA is standardized enough that all students are getting a relatively similar experience, and that the assessments are really beneficial as they can be created just by the teachers. Or is it too subjective? Can a teacher take it too far and manipulate the material to a point where all of their students would do extremely well because their assessments are too low, or they don't reflect what they really should be achieving at their level? So one thing I would like to find out more about in PBLA is whether or not the loose standardization that it takes on, the loose or more loose structure that it has as a form of curriculum and assessment and evaluation, whether or not this is valid and reliable.